Okay, so let's minimize that. I'm doing no editing, okay? You're getting a fresh video. I'm looking at my timer. I'm trying to make this like under 4 minutes, maybe. Basically, if I go over to, oh, did I X out of the tab? No! Alright, Bitcoin, BTC, there we go. Alright, load, alright, it's dipped a lot, okay? Like the last 5 days, it's just collapsed, okay? Bitcoin's down, boys. But fortunately, like I am a very pro Bitcoin person, and the reason is because it's well, my reasons are just the same as this fine young gentleman right here who made the fiat standard. Highly recommend you read the Bitcoin standard. The Case for Gold by James Rickards. He's an interesting guy. He wrote Currency Wars and some other stuff, but I think he fundamentally misunderstands why fiat won't collapse. It won't collapse into gold, and I don't think he understands the real he gets the historical nature of why how it was a swindle by the governments to convert to fiat, but I don't think he understands the fact that there's really not going to be a good amount of pressure causing governments to convert back to a gold standard. And he's been saying for years, invest in gold and be great. I'm like, look, gold doesn't seem to be going up or down really much at all, and I highly doubt you will see any increase in value. And the main thing is, like, especially when you don't have a large amount of money put into this as a monetary asset, what inevitably happens is that it lowers the value of it. And when you lower the value, then it becomes more likely to be used as an industrial metal. And when you do that, it will decrease your total stockpile of the monetary asset. And if you lower your total stockpile enough, in the short run it'll increase the price, but in the long run, if your stockpile decreases enough such that your flow rate into the new pile becomes a higher percentage. If I produce 20% of my entire supply of forks for the year, I'm using forks because I have a fork right here. I have one fork, but like worldwide, how many forks are just sitting in a warehouse somewhere, right? There's a certain amount of them sitting around waiting to be sold or used for some purpose. This is what happens when commodities, that most commodities aren't money, but if it was money ever, and it becomes a situation due to technology or whatever reason that it isn't money anymore, what very quickly tends to occur is the evisceration of the stockpile, and the increase, either the stockpile decreases such the flow rate percentage is higher, or the flow rate increases to therefore make your stock to flow ratio very very high. Ideally, you just want a very low increase in comparison to the total supply, such that there's very low inflation, right? You don't want you want it to A, be consistent, and B, be very minimal, if nothing at all. And that's, the reason why it exists at all, why there's a flow, is because it actually turns out we have an almost unlimited supply of most things on the planet, and this idea of scarcity is entirely based off of trade-offs. We have a ridiculous, like right outside my house, there's $24 million of copper. Like I look at it every day, and it's just sitting there, and no one will use it because it's in a ridiculous amount of metal slag waste, and it sits right outside my house. The metal content's so high that when you look at it, it looks shiny almost, and it copper mining stopped where I lived because the copper purity was actually too high, and it's actually more difficult to mine pure copper. It's the only it's like one of two places in the world that actually has raw copper coming out of the ground, not copper oxide, and it's inefficient to mine. anyways, so at the end of the day, there is a goshly amount of copper sitting right outside, but we have a limited amount of supply. There's a scarcity of it because only so much of it is mined each year, and you only mine so much because there's only so much demand for it. So that's the real situation. People say economics is a result of scarcity and trying to figure out how to allocate things. The only thing that's scarce is time it's just time and the human ability to do stuff in that time. And all other commodities are trade-offs from that. The actual resources on the planet are virtually limitless in many regards, or at least they have such a large stockpiles that we will not run out for centuries. And by the time we do run out, like especially for any metals, we will easily be able to go out to like the asteroid belts or whatever and be able to mine those. And obviously we won't even do that because most likely we will have a very high recycling rate. Many industries recycle more than they could ever produce. Like there's no way you can produce enough aluminum with given technologies at a cheap enough level without recycling most of it. You'll have to do this for lithium. People say, oh, there's not enough lithium for all these electric cars. I'm like, well, that may be so in terms of lithium production, but if you are able to have a properly functioning lithium recycling industry, then you can actually meet demand. Asphalt, almost all new road is 83% old road, so it's at the end of the day, like, we're not going to run out of things, and so that's the main thing. But basically, like, my opinion is that Bitcoin is everything gold was, but better, like by a lot. And there is, if you ever read anybody who makes the case for gold, like James Ricards here does, and lots of people do, and their arguments make total sense, and historically it's completely accurate, that fiat was a swindling of wealth from private citizens, then you have to ask yourself, well, does Bitcoin does all those things but better, so why would you not then think Bitcoin would be the better alternative? And the difference is that it actually has the potential for private citizens to not run into the same issues of gold, which is that gold is heavy and inconvenient to move around, and it's relatively expensive to move long distances. And so as a result, it makes sense to create some sort of credit system around it where you have receipts. And this creates a situation which is ripe for governments to confiscate it. I mean, at the end of the day, the world system, even though it's on a dollar system, it's all backed by gold. The only reason why institutions have credibility is because they have gold reserves. Private citizens don't have this luxury, but when you are a state and you want to have some legitimacy for your bank, you have to have a certain percentage of it in gold. Like, you have to have reserves of gold for people to have some collateral when you're doing credit, because at the end of the day, fiat runs on basically just printing money, and when you print money when you decide to lend it, and what if you default on this? People want some tangible substance that will hold its value very well, and there's only one substance that actually is there's only one commodity which turns out to be a financial medium, and that's gold. So it works for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin took over this role. But the difference is that if banks did that for Bitcoin, a lot of private citizens already own Bitcoin, and it'll be extremely easy for wealthy people to put certain percentages of their wealth into it. Unlike gold. I mean, really rich people don't put their money in gold because it's inconvenient to do, but with Bitcoin it's highly liquid. So anyways, that's my opinion, that in the long term I'm not really worried. And so you're like, well, what does this mean? Well, there's another good metric called not this one right here. This is called so there's something called the real value. And the real value, it says here, is created by this guy. This is not the website I learned it from. I learned it from an obscure video a long time ago. I don't know where it's from. And I've read it on different websites, obviously. And the main idea, excuse me, is you compare not the market, you compare the market cap, the trading amount that it is trading for, versus if you look on the ledger of when Bitcoins were moved. Given when the Bitcoin was moved, I've heard some discrepancies that it could also be from like this website. They say the equation is based off of when it was created. I don't think that makes sense, and I don't think that's what they would do. It makes more sense to me that, and that's the only website that I've heard that from. But it seems to me that basically, because you can figure out when every Bitcoin was moved, or at least generally you can come up with a really good approximation. It doesn't have to be perfectly precise. We're talking billions of dollars here. So what you do is you say, okay, given that this coin was moved at this price, you do a weighted average of all of that and say, okay, so we add up all the prices at which each coin was moved at, and then we have a total value, and then we divide that value by the number of Bitcoins in circulation, and then you get your real value of the network. And you can compare this to the market cap, which is just the current value that coins are trading for. And you can get a ratio of this, and the ratio is important because whenever you get a value of, actually I don't need this right here, this isn't important, this is just the ratio between the two, and if it ever dips below 1, it almost always will go back up relatively quickly because, well, it's such that the average price people bought in at is basically the network, the current trading price is lower than what most people bought in at, and so most people are inclined to want to buy more because they're like, oh wow, this is a great opportunity for me to get into things again. And it's also just not a fair price because a lot of people put a lot of their wealth in and they're just not going to sell at that level. So there's high incentive to buy because historically, it's probably going to go back up, and there's high incentive to not sell. Like, you might sell at a lot of prices, but if it goes that low, you're like, man, I'm not selling at this price. That's absurd. I'll lose my money. I'll realize my loss if I sell at this price. And so there's high incentive for it to just go back up. And, although I'm pretty sure what will happen if you keep this metric up for 40 years, what will happen is it'll probably get very close to 1. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't much higher than 1. Yeah, basically the higher this is, the more likely it's going to be volatile, right? Because it's not really like this metric indicates volatility. It's more along the lines of volatility tends to cause these things, right? Where you have a high price compared to the previous value. This is also just a result of high growth. If we have high growth in the next several years, you'll see very high ratios again. So, which makes sense. But the the right now it's finally dipped below the real value again. So, what's the I wonder what the real value is currently for Bitcoin. I have to look this up. Oh, right here. Bam. We can go right here. And we can determine real value. So BTC's there. BTC capitalization realized is this is in thousands of dollars, $49,000. Doesn't seem right. What date is that? Oh wow, that's very out of date. That makes sense. Okay, so this is not updated enough to actually look at this. Then how are they getting a chart from? I don't know. Anyways, I'm not editing this video, so I'm not gonna ask questions and do my. I'd actually look into this because the other chart that we're just looking at says it gets its data from here. But if it gets its data from there, then that doesn't really make sense because it's almost 9 months out of date. So I don't know where it's getting its data from already. Y'all have a good evening, and I'm gonna get to bed now. Bye. Where's the you're gonna get to see me find the icon and click the button. Bye.